Welcome, everyone, to Advantaged, an Alloy Partners podcast. I am Drew Beechler, our VP of Marketing here at Alloy Partners, and your host of this podcast, Advantaged. Alloy Partners is a venture builder. We partner with leading organizations and entrepreneurs to co-create advantaged startups and venture studios that unlock growth and transformation. And on the podcast, we interview corporate innovators, founders, and investors all around venture building, startup corporate partnerships, and how corporates and startups are winning together by working together rather than as adversaries. And here today, we have myself and Utsav Bhatt, the CEO of StratOff. StratOff is an alternative consulting firm designed for the AI era that helps organizations turn transformation ambition into execution. Utsav works with leadership teams across the globe on strategy, innovation, and enterprise transformation. And we've worked with Utsav for a number of years in our business and in the past as well. So thanks, Utsav, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Utsav, you've spent over a decade in IT consulting. You worked at Innosight with Elliot, our CEO, and a handful of others on our team in the past as well for a number of years. You've helped corporations, again, globally pursue disruptive innovation, and recently taken all that experience and knowledge, and you wrote a book on where consulting is heading. So maybe let's just start with what made you want to write this book? Who did you write it for? And tell us a little more about the book.
So I actually didn't set out to write a book. It started in December 2022 when I think ChatGPT just came out, and I started using it quite seriously, and something almost clicked immediately after using it for a few days. So I could figure out that there is a mega shift which is going to happen. This doesn't seem like a simple productivity tool. It's not like an Excel macro. It's something fundamentally different. To be fair, those days you had a lot of hallucinations, but it was quite clear where this technology was headed. And I've seen, interestingly, the same story play in a different industry, legal services. I had an opportunity to work with a client for close to 2 years, and I'd seen this transformation quite close in the legal services area. So with that experience, I started asking questions to myself and started taking down notes in terms of what this means for me as a consultant, my career trajectory, what this means in terms of how we deliver work, how should I assemble teams differently on projects. I did some very interesting experiments as well while trying that out. And what happens to the pyramid, which is so very well established. Then in 2023, when I started StratOff, my firm, it's a short for strategy office, those questions became more real. I was having conversations with clients, with peers who were working with McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and everyone could sense that there is some shift which is happening, but nobody had a clear language around it. So that's when the idea for the book came together, and it felt like you need to step back and look at what's happening at a meta level. So the book has been written for three groups, keeping three groups in mind. First are the clients who are now starting to ask questions around what it means to work with a consulting firm going forward, what kind of engagement we should look at. Second, it is for consulting firms and the leadership, which is asking this question on, is this model going to be viable in the long term, or should we reimagine how we deliver value to clients, how we should structure and organize ourselves? And most importantly, for consultants like me and others, all the way from those who are aspiring to join big consulting firms right now, doing their MBA in a very interesting time, all the way to partners who are asking this question on what this profession looks like for them going forward. So it's not meant to be a critique on the industry. I'm not saying the consulting is dead, McKinsey is no longer going to exist. It's a playbook of what's coming next. And it's essentially a very rare moment that we are in, where the rules of games are changing and no one knows what's going to come next. What I've tried to do is my best attempt at letting that playbook out in the world through my lived experience.
Could give us more of the thesis and what you found in the book around what alt consulting is arguing, and we'll drop a link to the book Alt Consulting here in the show notes as well. But what's the core problem with the way traditional consulting firms operate today or for the past 100 years of their existence or so?
A great question. I think the simplest way to explain it is this. Traditional consulting is built on a pyramid. AI is removing the base of that pyramid. And once research, synthesis, and even first draft of work that you do, it gets automated or semi-automated, the whole economic logic starts to break. So you simply don't need large team of junior consultants doing that work anymore. If you have a hands-on manager, hands-on associate partner, principal, or a partner, they could do much of that work on their own. So then the obvious question is what replaces it? So in the book, I took some time to design cover page, and it shows the pyramid with the base crumbling. And what comes next is a rocket shaped model, what a lot of people are calling now an obelisk model. So the shape is changing. It becomes much more in this new form of an obelisk. There are fewer layers. There is more senior judgment at the core. AI is doing a lot of work now. And more importantly, you will start getting priced for outcomes. You will not price for effort or time that you're putting in. And alongside this shift, you are already seeing new models of consulting firms emerge. And that's what is alt consulting short for. It's alternative consulting service providers. So in the book, based on my research, I listed 5 of these archetypes. Now, who knows what's going to happen in future? There might be a mix of these things or a new thing might emerge. But first are solo experts, people who are managers, associate partners, leaving consulting firms and using AI on their own to serve their clients. Second are small boutique firms, which are senior heavy, and at the base, instead of using too many analysts, they're using AI as their operating system. Third, you have strategy as a product firm. These all companies are saying we can productize consulting. You don't need to hire people. You can just use a product to do some prompts and your competitive analysis is done, your risk analysis is done. We can create even a new venture model for you on the fly. Then fourth and fifth are archetypes which have been existing for some time. So fourth is what I call as expert insight platforms. All consulting firms use them. They have a roster of phenomenal amount of experts across the globe, virtually in every area. What if clients start accessing them directly for work? What if these companies start using AI to mine the insights on interviews which are being conducted and start giving value to clients? And the fifth one are curated expert networks, which are all ex-MBB consultant, Accenture, IBM consultants, available on demand. So this company wins the award and then they deploy a team of consultants. So if you step back, the interesting part is it's not a capability problem that we are solving. I think the talent is incredible. The problem is incentives. So that's what we need to look at.
I would love your opinion too. We talked about this a little bit ago about a recent article from a Sequoia partner, Julian Beck, and I know you talked about it on your podcast recently too. But this idea of services as software and kind of the unbundling of services in that way, like really the massive opportunity there is to turn services more like software. But then also this balance between intelligence and judgment. And I think specifically within the consulting space, I'm curious just your take on this, but in particular, where do you think demand for intelligence and demand for judgment, and what are people really buying consulting for? What is the outcome, and how does that also change in the future too?
No, it's an interesting article which came out, which drove a lot of discussion. And I think more importantly, it was for product companies who said 3 years back that you don't need consultants anymore, just use us and you're done using a subscription-based model. But what they have realized is you still need that human layer. And this became quite apparent to me when I was having a conversation with a senior client. He basically said, Utsav, I need you to do some quick analysis, some quick strategy work for me. It'll take a couple of weeks of your time. And I said, you know what? I know you for a long time, and this work seems to be something that you can do yourself. This is your industry, your company. You know it much better. ChatGPT is there. You just need to write a few things and get it done. Why do you need me for? What do you need me for? And it's just $20, right? And he said, I can do that. But the problem is I'm not trained as a consultant. I'm trained as a person who has been running this company for some time. So I might miss certain lenses that you bring in. I might miss certain judgment that you bring in. So that became apparent. He said, that's why I'm willing to pay more for this service, because I know you will do a far better job just because you have been in the profession and you know how to do it. So that was one example with a client. The other example I had was with my analyst team. And I told them for every big project, we do a particular analysis, say what you call as goals and bounds, and we also do it. Can you just automate that for me for any new prospect that we are working for? Came back after 2 days and they said, no, sir, you can't do this. I was like, why? We can't do this because it hallucinates and it's not giving it in the right shape or form. It's just giving generic answer. It's not something which is ready for a meeting. And when I worked on it, I could figure out there's a way in which you could use a tool and get part of the framework automated. Now, the difference there was, and not a surprise anymore to people, but if you have spent like decades in consulting, you have had those experiences of sitting in meetings where clients have asked tough questions to you. You know what good judgment is, what is purely AI generated output versus what client actually asks for. So when you prompt or when you start using the tool directly as a seasoned consultant, the output is very different. And that's something which is creating issue in even how you delegate work in consulting now. Because if you have a team of junior consultants and say you have some work done, I was having this conversation with one of my friends at Bain. And he said earlier we used to have all those sticky notes, which we will give as feedback to our team members. But now the juniors are giving entire 10-page, very well done slides to me. And what I see from that is, oh gosh, you just missed one critical piece and now this has to be redone again. So the workload actually is increasing at the judgment layer. That's actually something very interesting that what comes to my mind when I look at how services are still more important. It can't be just productized and left to people. How judgment is still very crucial, and people who have had that experience for a long time can add a real value.
Still the missing piece, and I think one of the last things that probably will be taken over by the robots. I'd love to talk a little through a couple of kind of real life scenarios. You've worked with a number of companies going through AI transformation, not just pilots and experiments, but really implementing that throughout the business. Walk us through maybe a couple of examples of what that actually looks like, and particularly any that surprised you or where you saw just an immediate impact on their business.
So it's early days. I'll give an example, which is actually in terms of how consulting service was bought by the client. So I'll talk about that experience. Now, most companies today are still in what we could call as pilot theater. In innovation, like when I was working with Elliot, there's a common term we used to use. A lot of companies have innovation theater. They do a lot. There's a lot of sort of show and song and dance around it, but nothing actually happens. Similarly, here there are AI pilots. I just spoke to someone yesterday, two clients, one in Singapore, one in Australia. Both of them like, hey, we just had a co-pilot training. I was like, great. And what did you do after that? He said, no, we know how to use it, but nobody actually spoke to us about what does it mean for our work. I know how can I use it maybe in a Word document and write something better. My memo would be much better. I can have an idea of how to use it in Excel, but nothing more than that. There's a lot of sort of demos, pilots which are going on, but very little is getting changed in terms of how business actually runs. When it actually does, it looks very different. So the example which I would share is a client once called me and he said, Utsav, I have around 5 weeks. There is a board meeting coming up. I have a slot for half an hour to present my thinking on what should be our AI strategy and how should we go into the space and how it impacts our current organization plans. It is urgent, it is important, but I don't have time to run through procurement and get a traditional engagement done because it's not possible. I don't have time, budget, or patience to work with M+2 partners coming in, having discussions for a few weeks and run an 8 to 12 week project, which would cost $750,000 to $1 million. So he said, can you do it in 4 weeks? I said, yeah, let's give it a try. So this was not a lightweight version, an entire, 80, 100-page AI strategy, full board ready got out. Work quite closely with the chief strategy officer on this. So all the concerns she had was taken care of, directions, priorities, internal initiatives. And what was interesting to her was not the speed. Like that was something which, happens because you're using AI. It was this understanding. And she said that I conceptually understood your model when you pitched to me that there's a senior person using AI, but I never could really imagine what it means to feel, how you feel once you go through that experience. So when she actually used the service, she said, now I know how to use these services. Now I know in which particular situations I can start using consulting. And that open doors and opportunities for areas which are traditional areas of non-consumption, where a client will never think about hiring a consulting firm because either it's too small, but they still need good thinking. So she said, all this work which I was doing, managing myself, I have other priorities as well. Now I know I can just call you and you can do this work for me. It's a very different model. So I know what is now possible. So that's something which, as an example, that I remember quite fondly. And once that happens, once you experience it, two things happen. First is you reset your expectations on what is possible. And second is you start questioning everything else, which you will earlier not, on what we might not do. And the conversation moves from how do we use AI today in our current business to should we be working in this way at all?
We've seen a lot of companies, it's rolling out Copilot or ChatGPT licenses. It's at the edges, it's on the fringes, it's in kind of very specific back office functions. But to your point, it's not really driving real transformation inside the business at the core. It's always at the edges. And oftentimes it's efficiency gains. It's just optimization as well. But what does it actually take to get AI into the core of how a business operates, into redefining how the business operates, creating new models for operating, creating new models for creating new products, creating entirely new business units? Where is the gap? Where are we falling short, and what are we missing here on that front?
I think what's happening right now, as you put it quite clearly, is a lot of optimization being in play. And you're automating all the back office functions, right? HR, procurement, receivable, payable, all that. And it's not bad. It's a great start. You're seeing some value. At least you're seeing cost. You're seeing saving some cost. You're improving efficiency. You are building confidence of the organization and using the technology. That is powerful. But it's at the edges. The way I would want to explain is with a simple 2x2 consulting framework. So you have on x-axis a business model, right? Y-axis is technology. Now, when you have a business model, which is current, and then there is new business model, technology is again existing and new technology. So when you're using your existing business model and a new technology like AI, what best you're doing is technology innovation. You are trying to be more efficient, faster, better, cheaper. But what becomes interesting is when you say, you're using this technology, but now we are consciously going to rethink what's the new business model for us. That's where actually disruption also happens. And that's where you start reimagining what the purpose and how you should deliver the value that you want for your customers. And when that happens, there are three things which need to shift. First is the business model itself. So you need to relook at, is it really the value that I'm delivering? Is it really the profit formula which I should work with? My delivery model. So the operating model also comes in question. What are the new processes, workflows, decision rights, metrics, incentive system? All that needs to be questioned. In fact, an example comes to my mind. This is not something which has happened for the first time. This has happened in 1980s and 90s. There was a famous economist by the name Robert Solow. There are articles around Solow paradox also. So in 1987, he said he can see computers, because that was the age of computerization. So benefits of computers are seen everywhere except in productivity. So it took good 10 to 15 years for industry to start showing benefits of computerization. And the examples there were like quite strikingly simple. Go to a bank and say, hey, you have a team of 50 people doing matching check numbers to bank accounts. You know what? We have now a scanner which can do it for you. It's connected to a computer. And they said, hang on, if you automate it, what if there is a issue there? What if it reads the code wrong? And then the different account gets credited. So all issues which people raised were gradually addressed, and it took some time. Now it's just AI, which is, hey, how do we trust that AI judgment is right? What about the risks around it? What about it's hallucinating, right? So the story has already happened. Smart people have written books on it. In fact, the whole discipline of business process reengineering came from this. So what needs to be done, apart from working on the edges, which is great start, is start seriously relooking at your processes and reimagining them for future. Because that's what would make you a different company. Otherwise, you might just become more efficient.
You've talked a lot too around that we have all these conversations around tools and not really enough around behavior change. CEOs are rolling out AI. They're not seeing the productivity gains they expected, which I don't know if you saw. There's a new Deloitte study that just came out in the last week. I haven't dug into it too much, but similar around some of the early studies of spend on AI, but not seeing kind of the return. What are they missing there? What is the kind of underlying, I think, behavior change problem that we really aren't talking enough about probably?
No, I've thought a lot about this because it's very easy to go back and blame people that, oh, you're not adopting AI and you need to drive behavior change. But I think what CEOs might be missing is actually quite simple. I don't think people are resisting AI in that way. They are just trying to fiercely protect how they know how to succeed. So if there's a playbook which has been working for decades in a company, why would you challenge it? And by challenging it, what's the guarantee that you will be on the right side of the firm? So if a career has been built on owning information, around being the expert in the room, around following a standard set of structured and process, AI actually threatens all three. information is not a power. You're not the expert in the room, no more. AI can also do some of the work for you, and the process can be reimagined. So what do people do? As they would naturally, they don't reject AI. They say, hey, you know what? I can use AI to improve my existing process. So I'll make it faster, better, cheaper, but I'll not reimagine it. And that's why productivity gains will not show up, because just by writing a few mails much better, doing better drafts, or doing some thinking on certain work will not translate into top line or bottom line. And that's what Deloitte and the studies are pointing to. I also went through a few of them. There was a study of 6,000 CEOs which said 90% of them are saying AI hasn't meaningfully moved productivity. McKinsey is saying 94% companies are stuck in some pilot mode. And MIT had a study which said of all the companies who have done a lot of investment in training in AI capability building, 84% of them have not changed a single role. So the pattern is very clear. We are investing in tools, we are investing in some initial training, but we are not redesigning work. We are not having a contextual session with employees to say, hang on, here is an expert coming in. AI is, yes, a way to do it, but we are going to sit for next 2 days to rethink how we run this process. That's not happening. I had an opportunity to do one of these with one of the leading laptop companies. The entire marketing team was there in a room. We had 50 people. And the topic was, how do you drive marketing innovation using custom GPTs? This was like a couple of years back when custom GPTs just became popular. And they were doing a lot of FAQs on their website where through AI. So they kept on saying, we have done a bunch of work here. Customer complaints get addressed like that. We are also tweaking some of the marketing collaterals using AI. But then we took an example and said, hey, your boss has said there's a new product coming up and you have to go and launch in this particular market. This is your ideal customer profile. Make a marketing plan for it. So the entire marketing plan was on the fly. We showed it. And I said, I'm not a marketing expert by any means, but is this good enough for you? If you start doing it, won't it be much better? They all said, yeah, this is great. And then I said, okay, how much time does it take to do this? Is it around 2-3 weeks of internal discussions, alignments? Now it's done in like a couple of minutes. Then I asked a very interesting question that your boss has suddenly changed the mind at saying that he'll not go to this market. We can go into a new market, focus on a different customer segment. What would you do? I said, again, we will work on that market. Now you just need to put the new context and the plan is ready. There was a pin drop silence in the room where they did not know how to react. And the marketing head later on told me, Utsav, this is exactly what I wanted. I know out of 50 people in my team, there are 5 who are super users. They exactly know what to do. They exactly know what the new process would be. It's just that there is no incentive for people to share that because they have no clue around impact on their jobs. They have no clue around their career trajectory. So they use it themselves, show their work in a better light, and gradually the work starts moving to them because they can just get things faster. So that's something which I have seen working with clients.
Yeah, I think some of it is identity as well. How does your identity, if you see yourself as a coder, as a software engineer, how is that impacted if now your job is just reviewing code from the agents that have written the code? And yes, you're still very involved in the process, but I think I think it's a really hard kind of human psychology kind of problem that we aren't really addressing or thinking about too much. And it's just happening very quickly. I think that's too, like the span of the last 2 years is probably a decade of what happened in the Industrial Revolution. And I think that's what's also scary maybe to people too is, oh, I don't know what 2 years from now is going to be like. Is it going to accelerate or stay on this pace, or is it going to come back down to earth and into a less exponential curve? And that's what I think is also just very scary for people, of the change kind of side of that perspective too.
Yeah, no, I think the general approach which most of the companies are taking in the market is this is about upskilling of people, and you need to learn how to use AI. And I think that's fine, but that's not enough. Like you said, the roles would change, the identity would change. A developer might in future be a product thinker, an analyst might be from analysis to being a decision maker. And that's very uncomfortable because in my head, identity is tied to your status, your expertise, and how you see your value to the organization, the work that you're doing. And if you don't address that, the transformation would fail. So if a company is approaching this, and that's what we do with our Rewire system. So for any company to drive AI adoption, there are 3 phases. First is you reimagine, then you redesign, and then you realize. And that solves the identity problem that you raised. So when you talk about reimagine, you're looking at the business model of the company. Now we know business model has three components: your CVP, customer value proposition, delivery model, profit formula. But there's a fourth component which often gets overlooked. It's there in the books, but people don't write or talk about it. It's the systems and culture which connect all these three dots. Now, systems and culture in any company evolve so precisely that they fiercely protect the business model. They have over decades being refined and refined in such a way that they operate in a way that company keeps on making money the way it has always done. Now, this to me, I call it as biological DNA, because even biological DNA doesn't change. It rejects change. So you need to unpack the two strands, look at system and culture. System has structure, roles, and rules of a company. So metrics, incentive system, who's reporting to whom, what's my new role in the company. But there is a cultural element where the identity problem comes in. That's your belief system, what you believe this company is about, how you feel working in the organization, and what are the behaviors that you see. I have seen so often that people go into an AI training workshop, they come out, and then two people are casually chatting at the cubicles. Yeah, this was great. Let's get back to doing our work. Now, when some junior person overhears that, came from the training session with a lot of insights and charged up to think about how to work differently, suddenly hears two people having this conversation. That just behavior makes them say, okay, nothing is changing. This was just a HR training that we had to go to. So you have to understand these elements, list down a list of sort of blockers that you're facing, and then design interventions which can help on both the aspects. So specifically related to like identity of employees, you might need to redefine their roles, responsibilities, their job descriptions, their designations. You need to have a clear communication on how the future org structure would be, and define clear pathways. In fact, just before we started this, there's an article came out, just came out today, Jack Dorsey talking about future of block. And then he says they have eliminated 4,000 roles in the company. And he says, I don't need the middle management. They have always been talking about you don't need the analysts or the junior layer. He's saying we don't need the middle management. And you just need three kinds of people in the company. One are AI systems. So for back office and other things, maybe that's where he's hinting at AI systems will do all the things that you need it to do. Then you need deep specialists who take instructions from the AI system. So you prompt, you chat, you work with them. You are the ones who can interface with the AI system. And then you need some senior figures who know people development skills and are also hands-on in terms of how do we combine these insights coming from systems and developing people. Now that's a very different way to think about a company. And if you look at any incumbent large organization, thinking about this kind of change, it's massive, right? It challenges forget people, it challenges the identity of company itself. What are you trying to build? So yes, and in all this, coming back to your point, psychological safety is a very important element. If you're saying I'm going to use AI quite aggressively in specific process, then the employees need to be quite clear. Are we on our way out? Are we here to get upskilled and designed to do some more value-added work? Or if I do some experiment in a real client matter or in a real client interface, and if it fails, would I still have my job? So is somebody backing me up? So you need psychological safety for them to experiment. Otherwise, they won't even risk to change.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I haven't read that article from Jack Dorsey yet, so I will add that to my list here today. One, to end us on maybe a somewhat provocative topic, I have to ask, so as you see the future laying out over the next decade, 5 to 10 years, does McKinsey still exist in this world? Does a Cognizant still exist in this world? What does the consulting industry look like on the other side of all of this?
I think one aspect which is very clear from other disruptions, because just putting the disruptive innovation lens, the incumbents are not keeping their eyes shut. They are quite clear with what AI can do, cannot do. In fact, all the incumbents, in this case, McKinsey, Bain, BCGs, have quite a deep partnership with big AI tool providers. They have used billions of tokens to train their internal team. They are openly talking about how many thousands of agents they have right now. So they are not flying blind. They are using it. They're adopting it. In fact, they are changing their business model to now talking about outcome-based work. So I feel McKinsey, Cognizant, other firms will exist. They won't look the same maybe. And I think what would change is not the demand of strategy. I think that might still increase because more complexity would come. But what would change is how it will get delivered, how it will get priced, who delivers it, and how even clients unbundle the work. So you will see maybe smaller teams, more senior teams in certain cases. You will see a lot of maybe mid-sized companies who could never afford consulting services start working with certain seasoned consultants who are now more affordable because AI has changed the game for them. You would see on-demand consulting, more competition from non-traditional players who you never thought would be consulting firms. At the same time, for MBB, I think they would retreat to the top of the most complex consulting work for organizations, for which they will not even mind paying top dollars. That's not even the question for them because those problems on which they are working would be quite enormous. They will do a more of outcome-based work. They have openly stated that. And that would start happening, in my opinion, in areas where they have deep expertise. So if you have a deep domain expertise, then you can do much better outcome-based work. But they will still bill by the hour for some of the projects. Now, the interesting game, which I'm actually keenly observing, is there is a lot of movement from these top consulting firms to clients. So clients are now hiring seasoned partners and associate partners and managers from consulting firms because the pyramid is shrinking and there are very few openings at the top. So where would these people go? So they move and migrate to, one option is to move into strategy offices of companies. When that happens, then for the first time, you would see a lot of top-end corporations having sophisticated internal consulting teams. Some of them already had that for a long time, but now many would have it, which will make procurement quite interesting because they would say, why do we need to hire you for 6 months to do this piece of work when I can take part of it internally? I can hire an alternative consulting provider, or I can use a consulting as a product to do the analyst work. And we all know 60 to 70% of the work is done by analysts. So I'll get that work done differently. Then I'll come to you and say, instead of 6 months, I'll hire you for 4 weeks. I'll pay you the top dollars. But then you start working on the work which I have done already, and then come and align my board on it. Because that work will still be done by partners who have done that for years. That's an interesting shift. And I spoke to one of my friends, an ex-top consultant in New York. He moved to a telco company as an in-house strategy director. And he's saying, Utsav, there's so many projects which I can stop now because I know this can be done faster. And I know for which project, which consulting firm and which partner I need to talk to outside. That knowledge the firm never had. So in their own incentive, they're like, I know how to do this work, so I'll keep myself busy. Only when the demand overflows, I'll think of hiring someone, and that too for a specific work. Because that for them is a great value add, right? They would say, I've saved so much money by having smart bunch of consultants inside. So I don't think we are seeing end of consulting in any way. We are seeing the end of consulting as a labor, or as I write in my book, it's the subtitle says end of strategy consulting as we knew it. It's a beginning of consulting as a leverage. So it's just going to flip, and you might see something very exciting going forward.
Well, thank you, Utsav, so much for joining us today. This is an awesome episode. I look forward to working with you and talking more in the future. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.